Some sounds are meant to stay buried in the static, but the desert has a way of digging up what should never be heard. What Chloe discovered on Highway 191 that night proved that some broadcasts are oncoming from any tower on Earth. The digital clock on her dashboard read 11:47 p.m. And the endless stretch of Highway 191 through the Mojave Desert had become a hypnotic blur of darkness, punctuated only by her headlights carving through the void. His words were rushed, panicked, as if he were running out of time. Chloe had been driving for 6 hours straight. When she first heard the voice cutting through the white noise of her car radio, she'd been scanning through static, hoping to find anything to keep her company on the long drive to Phoenix, when a man's voice suddenly broke through the crackling interference. Blue Honda Civic, license plate 7 Delta 291, traveling eastbound on Highway 191... Chloe's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Those were her exact license plate numbers. She glanced at her rearview mirror, half expecting to see police lights. But there was nothing behind her except endless darkness. Approximately 15 miles past the Barstow exit, current speed 62 miles per hour. Mile marker 247 is coming up in about 4 minutes, and that's where Chloe slowed to a crawl, her eyes scanning the roadside for anything unusual. Nothing, just desert scrub and the occasional tumbleweed. Rolling across the asphalt, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible over the static. She reached for the radio knob to change the station, but as soon as her fingers touched it, the voice became crystal clear. The voice knew her name. She immediately lifted her foot off the gas pedal, watching the needle drop to 55, but the voice kept talking. The voice continued, clearer now, as if she were tuning into the right frequency. She doesn't see it yet, but it's there. It's always there, waiting in the spaces between the markers, in the places where the road forgets to exist. You need to hear this. They're still sitting in their cars, listening to the frequency that never ends, becoming part of the signal that warns the next driver. Something compelled her forward, as if the voice had planted a hook in her mind that pulled her inexorably toward mile marker 251. The voice had become a constant companion, describing her every movement, her every thought, as if it were reading her mind. With desperate fingers, she pulled every fuse she could find from the fuse box, but nothing stopped the transmission. Can you feel it, Chloe? The weight of all the other voices trying to break through? They want to warn you, but they can't. So it's coming from all the cars, all the drivers, their voices blending together into a single, endless broadcast. The driver sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead with empty eyes, his lips moving silently, as if he were speaking into a radio microphone that wasn't there. Her lips began to move, forming words she didn't remember choosing to speak. They can only add to the signal, make it stronger for the next driver who'll hear it in a month, or a year, or whenever the desert decides it's hungry again. You need to know what's coming for you at mile marker 251. As she approached, she saw them. Other cars, maybe a dozen, parked along the shoulder. Their headlights were still on, engines running. But they were covered in a fine layer of desert dust that suggested they'd been there for a very long time. It's been waiting for someone like you, someone who drives alone at night, someone who... Maybe someone had hacked into radio frequencies, or it was some elaborate joke she didn't understand. But how could they know her exact location, her speed, her license plate? There's an empty space right there between the Camry and the motorcycle. Park there and add your voice to ours. Someone will be along eventually, someone who drives alone at night, someone who needs to hear the warning about mile marker 251. She turned off the engine, expecting the radio to die with it, but the voice kept talking, clearer than ever. The screen showed no bars, no service, just the cold blue glow of a device that had become utterly useless. She was completely alone, except for the voice that seemed to be broadcasting from somewhere beyond the known world. but there was nothing except the usual late-night AM talk shows and country music. But it won't help, Chloe. You're a part of the broadcast now, Chloe. Every car that drives this stretch becomes part of the signal. Every driver who hears the voice becomes a relay station for the next one. It never helps. The radio doesn't need power where you are. The desert provides its own frequency, its own signal. You're in the dead zone now, where the normal rules don't apply. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the engine noise. A chill ran down Chloe's spine. She looked at her speedometer. 62 exactly. She's slowing down now, probably scared. She should be scared. The transmission cut to static. Chloe frantically turned the radio dial, trying to find the station again. She told herself it had to be some kind of prank. The mile marker 247 sign appeared in her headlights like a ghost materializing from the darkness. She was about to speed up again when the voice returned, this time more urgent. ... She's seeing quotes is at 247 now, looking around like a lost little lamb. What the hell? ... THS, touch that dial. Chloe. The voice knew her name. Chloe pulled over to the shoulder, her hands shaking as she threw the car into park. ... Stop now, thinking that will help. She yanked the key from the ignition, but the radio display remained lit, the voice continuing its relentless monologue. ... Trying to shut me off, but you can't. Chloe grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Mile marker 251 is 3 miles ahead. Okay, that's where you'll meet the others who heard the voice. They're still there, Chloe. Against every instinct screaming at her to turn around, Chloe found herself starting the engine again. The desert seemed different now, more alive somehow. The shadows between the Joshua trees moved wrong, and the stars above flickered like dying light bulbs. 2 miles now. Mile marker 251 appeared like a tombstone in her headlights. She pulled over and walked to the nearest car, a red pickup truck. Voice from her radio was clearer now, and she realized with growing horror that it wasn't coming from one source. Welcome to the frequency, Chloe. Take your place in the signal. As Chloe walked back to her car, she could feel the weight of the transmission settling into her mind like sediment. Blue Honda Civic, license plate 7 Delta 291, traveling eastbound on Highway 191... The desert wind carried her voice into the static, where it would wait for the next lonely driver to tune in to the frequency that follows. Sometimes children know things they shouldn't know, and sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Marcus had always been proud of his ability to connect with his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, after his wife's death 2 years prior. He'd made it his mission to be both mother, and his face is really pale, like he's been sleeping for a long, long time. What concerned him slightly was how detailed her descriptions were becoming. Before we moved in, says, he remembers when the walls were different colors. And father to her, learning to braid her hair and paint her nails, while still teaching her to throw a baseball. So, when Emma started talking about her new friend, Patchwork Pete, 3 weeks ago, Marcus listened with the patient attention he'd cultivated. He's got patches all over his clothes, Daddy, Emma had explained over breakfast, her cereal growing soggy as she gesticulated excitedly. Marcus had smiled, remembering his own childhood imaginary friends. It seemed natural that Emma would create a companion, especially given the upheaval in her young life. Pete says he used to live in our house, Emma continued one evening as Marcus tucked her into bed. He says he's been waiting for someone to find where he sleeps. He doesn't like the dark place. This gave Marcus a pause. They'd bought the house from an elderly couple who'd lived there for 40 years. She stopped at a patch of earth that looked slightly different from the surrounding soil, a rectangular depression about 3 feet long, barely visible beneath the fallen leaves. Marcus was raking leaves in the backyard when Emma appeared beside him, her small hand slipping into his. The patch of ground was exactly the size of a small grave. Keith says this is where his box is. The previous owners had mentioned doing extensive renovations in the 1980s, including repainting every room. How could Emma know about different wall colors? Keith says he's tired of the dark. He told himself he was simply humoring his daughter, that he'd dig a few inches and find nothing but dirt and roots. But as the blade bit into the soft earth, he noticed the soil was different here, looser, as if it had been disturbed before. She'd been watching from the porch, but her voice carried clearly across the yard. He's been waiting in there for so long. The bones were yellowed with age, clearly those of a child. He stumbled backward, nearly falling down the porch steps. Oh, this wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Scraps of fabric clung to the remains, patches of different colors and patterns, just as Emma had described. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't frightened. She was concerned, but not about the contents of the suitcase. "What else does Pete tell you?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "He's sad," Emma whispered, pulling her blanket up to her chin. Marcus could see his breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. The afternoon sunlight seemed to dim, though there were no clouds overhead. The conversations continued for days, each one adding another unsettling detail. He could smell something damp and earthy, like soil and decay. When he finally found the courage to turn around, he saw nothing but empty air. Marcus's hands trembled as he cleared away the remaining dirt, revealing the corner of what appeared to be an old suitcase. The investigation that followed would dominate local news for weeks. The remains were identified as those of Peter Jameson, a 7-year-old boy who had disappeared from the neighborhood in 1983. The case had never been solved. "He doesn't like that you found his box. She says he likes having a friend who knows where he sleeps. He needs to keep an eye on his daughter. He says it wasn't supposed to be opened. The leather was cracked and stained, with tarnished metal clasps that looked decades old." Pete apparently knew about the loose floorboard in the hallway that Marcus had only recently discovered. Pete's here, and he's not happy. He knew about the old well in the backyard that had been filled in decades ago. He knew things a child's imagination shouldn't conjure. When he lifted it from the makeshift grave, he could hear something shifting inside, not the solid weight of belongings, but something brittle and hollow. The breaking point came on a gray Saturday morning in October. Emma had gone inside, and Marcus was grateful for the privacy as he knelt beside the suitcase. The clasps were corroded, but still functional. They opened with a rusty click that seemed to echo in the quiet afternoon. "Daddy, Pete wants to show you something," she said, her voice unusually serious. "Oh yeah, what's that, sweetheart?" "Here, where he sleeps. He says it's time." Emma led him to the far corner of the yard, near the old oak tree where the previous owners had planted a small garden. "Here," Emma said simply. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Emma, honey, why don't you go inside and ... Pete says you need to dig now," she interrupted, her blue eyes fixed on the spot with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. Against his better judgment, Marcus found himself retrieving a shovel from the garage. After 20 minutes of digging, the shovel struck something hard. "That's Pete's box," Emma said quietly. Marquis's throat felt dry as he fully unearthed the suitcase. It was small, child-sized, and unnaturally light. His hands shook as he carried it to the porch. Inside, wrapped in the rotted remains of what might have been a blanket, was a small skeleton. Marcus slammed the suitcase shut, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Daddy." Emma's voice came from the doorway. "Are you okay?" Marcus turned to look at his daughter, and the expression on her face made his blood freeze. "Pete's upset," she said softly. As if summoned by her words, the temperature around the porch dropped noticeably. "Emma, we need to go inside. Now." But Emma was no longer looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on something behind him, something Marcus couldn't see but desperately didn't want to turn around to face. "He's here, Daddy," she whispered. Marcus felt a presence behind him, cold and patient and angry. But Emma was still staring at the spot where Marcus had felt the presence, her small hand raised in a hesitant wave. "Hi, Pete," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Daddy. Opened your box." That night, Marcus called the police, but Marcus knew the truth that the investigators would never uncover. Some children don't stay buried. Some children wait in the dark until someone finds them. And some children make friends with little girls who can see them. Emma still talks to Pete. She says he's not angry anymore, just lonely. Marcus has put the house up for sale, but until they move, he makes sure Emma's bedroom door stays open at night, because sometimes when he passes by her room, he hears her talking to someone in a voice too old and too cold to belong to a 6-year-old child. And sometimes that someone talks back. Some purchases haunt you forever, but Jessica's new phone brought the haunting literally home. Jessica had always been practical about money. When her old phone finally died after 3 years of loyal service, she didn't hesitate to browse the used electronics section online. The iPhone she found seemed too good to be true. Barely a year old, factory reset, and priced at half its retail value. The seller, someone named David Chin, had excellent reviews and claimed he was upgrading to a newer model. The transaction was smooth, professional, and Jessica felt satisfied with her bargain. For the first week, everything seemed perfect. The phone worked flawlessly, the battery life was excellent, and Jessica was pleased with her purchase. She used it for the usual things: texting friends, checking social media, and taking photos of her daily life. Behind her left shoulder, barely visible in the reflection of the window, was what looked like a pale smudge. Jessica squinted at the screen, zooming in, but the image became too pixelated to make out clearly. But what terrified her most was that the woman seemed to be getting closer in each photo, as if she was trying to reach through the screen itself. She couldn't stop thinking about the face, couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt oppressive. She found herself glancing over her shoulder constantly, expecting to see that pale, anguished face staring back at her. She shrugged it off as a weird lighting effect, or maybe someone walking past outside. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of shadow sent her heart racing. She considered factory, resetting the phone again, but something told her it wouldn't help. This wasn't a software glitch. It was something else entirely. It wasn't until she was scrolling through her camera roll that she noticed something odd. I thought factory resetting would fix it, but it didn't. Emma was my girlfriend. She died in a car accident 6 months ago. Took so many photos of her with that phone. ... I think she's somehow trapped in it. But then other people started seeing her too. My friends, my family, everyone could see her face in my photos. She was getting clearer, more defined, like she was trying to communicate something. I couldn't handle it anymore. I had to get rid of the phone. In a selfie she'd taken at her favorite coffee shop, there was something in the background that made her pause. But as Jessica read the message, her blood ran cold. I was wrong. She's still there, isn't she? I have an urgent question. Have you seen her yet? The screen showed her reflection, but she wasn't alone. Kaya stood directly behind her, no longer pale and distorted, but solid and real. When she looked back at the phone, Emma was gone, but a new message had appeared in her photo app, a single image that Jessica had never taken. And in the driver's seat, barely visible through the spider-webbed glass, was Emma, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her mouth was moving, forming words that Jessica couldn't hear, but somehow understood. It was from right now, the exact moment Jessica was looking at it. Emma's face was crystal clear now, her mouth open as if she was screaming, her eyes wide with terror and desperation. Jessica typed, though she dreaded the answer. But there was something else in her expression now, something that made Jessica's blood freeze. But Jessica... In my last photo, before I sold the phone, she wasn't in the background anymore. She was standing right next to me. I think she was getting stronger. The sender was David Chen, the man who had sold her the phone. Jessica pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders as she read David's explanation. He told her about Emma's death, how she'd been driving to surprise him for his birthday when she'd lost control on a wet road. He'd kept taking photos with the phone afterward, trying to preserve their memories. But that's when Emma started appearing in the background of his pictures. The ghost had a name, she typed with trembling fingers. What are you talking about? The next photo was different. Jessica had taken a picture of her cat, Whiskers, sleeping on her windowsill. The cat was perfectly clear, bathed in afternoon sunlight, but there, in the shadow between the curtains, was that same pale smudge. Jessica zoomed in again, her hands trembling slightly as she manipulated the image. The pale area had what could be eyes, dark and hollow, and what might have been a mouth. But that was impossible. She'd been alone in her apartment when she took the photo, only this time it was more defined. It almost looked like a face. Her heart skipped a beat. Over the next few days, Jessica found herself obsessively checking every photo she took. The presence appeared in about half of them, always in the background, always pale and distorted, but becoming increasingly clear with each appearance. In a photo of her lunch, the face peered over her shoulder from behind. In a mirror selfie, it stood directly behind her reflection, its features becoming sharp enough to make out individual details. Sunken cheeks, stringy hair, and eyes that seemed to stare directly at the camera. The face was that of a young woman, maybe in her 20s, with an expression of desperate sadness that made Jessica's skin crawl. Jessica stopped taking photos altogether, but the damage was done. Sleep became elusive. Then, on a particularly restless night, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi Jessica, I hope you're enjoying the phone." Jessica's hands shook as she typed back, "Seen who?" The response came immediately. "Please, I need to know. Have you seen Emma in your photos?" Emma. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. "I should have warned you." David's next message read, "I'm sorry." The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. "At first, I thought it was just grief playing tricks on me," David wrote. "Jessica felt sick. Why didn't you tell me? I thought it would stop if someone else owned it." Jessica looked at her most recent photo, the one of Whiskers on the windowsill. Recognition. Emma wasn't just trapped in the phone, okay? She was aware of Jessica, aware that she was the new owner, and she was trying to reach out to her specifically. What does she want? David's response took several minutes to arrive. "I don't know," as if summoned by his words. Jessica's phone camera app opened by itself. "Help me." Jessica spun around, but her apartment was empty. It was a photo of a car, twisted and wrapped around a tree, with rain streaming down the cracked windshield. But what made Jessica's heart stop was the timestamp on the photo. It wasn't from 6 months ago when Emma died. The phone grew ice cold in her hands, and somewhere in the silence of her apartment, Jessica could swear she heard the sound of squealing tires and the distant echo of a scream that would never end. And with that final story, we pull back from the abyss. For now, tales of ordinary lives brushing against the extraordinary, the terrifying, the unexplainable, from the shadow that mimics to the voice that calls from an empty house. We've seen tonight how thin the veil between our reality and a much darker one can be. These stories are not just fiction. They are born from real experiences, whispered in hushed tones, and shared to remind us that we are not always alone. And that's the most chilling thought, isn't it? Perhaps one of tonight's stories reminded you of something that happened to you, or to someone you know. A strange occurrence you've tried to forget. A noise in the night you rationalized away. A figure you saw for just a second. The details of your own brush with the darkness are what give this channel life. I invite you to leave your own story in the comments below. Let us know what you've seen in the shadows. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps these tales reach others who need a reminder to check their locks at night. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. We have so many more stories to share, and you won't want to be left in the dark. Until next time, remember that you are not afraid of being alone. You are afraid of the bone-deep certainty that you are not.